So it looks like you guys have been enjoying our recent YouTube shorts, and I think I know why. Actually, no, we know why. We have access to our own analytics. You guys are enjoying clickbaiting. That's right. When we clickbait a video, our impressions click-through rate goes way up. So we're going to keep clickbaiting videos, including this one. And this video has that in common with shorts, and it also has the thing in common with shorts where it was kind of supposed to be a short, but I couldn't actually fit everything I wanted to say about what we're talking about today in a minute, so we're doing a YouTube medium. I'm trademarking that. This is a YouTube medium. It's 8 shorts stapled together, but they're all about one thing. Today on the dossier, we have Lind Cheerful Tormentor. Now, before we can get into stuff, I do want to say that we're going to be referencing a lot of source material. We're going to be referencing my $125 budget list, which is in the description below, and that list is referencing the deck I actually played in the big video for the Innistrad Midnight Hunt release, and that the link to that video will obviously be down in the description below as well. And then, hey, we did some live streams over on Twitch, so the Twitch is down in the description below. And the last thing we have in the description for you on this is going to actually be the re-uploads of the Lind games to MTG The Stack Rebound. If you're not subbed there, you should go check it out. We just re-upload all of our live stream individual games there so you guys can see them without having to go through the nonsense of watching an entire live stream if you're someone who might not have time for that. Now, mind you, this isn't going to be a full deck tech. If you want to see the deck, you can look at it. I'm just going to be talking about the commander herself and how I would play this commander, you know, the practical application for what she does. Talk a little bit about some important card choices, maybe talk about how the archetype that I'm playing in particular was formulated, and then talk about other ways you could maybe build her towards the end. But we're going to start off by reading Lind Cheerful Tormentor, and we have a 2/4 human warlock for Grixis and 1 with Death Touch, and whenever a curse is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, return it to the battlefield attached to you at the beginning of your next end step. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may attach a curse attached to you to one of your opponents. If you do, draw 2 cards. Reading Lind tells me 2 things. 1, all of the tryhards playing Xantcha Curses finally have an actual Curses commander that they can go play. So anyone you know who's playing Xantcha Curses, if they don't know about Lind, tell them they're going to make the switch. It's going to be a better game for everybody. But the most important thing it tells us is how we're actually going to play the commander, which is a little bit nuanced, and a lot of it has to do with that second line of text telling you that you get to divination. Every time you want to gift one of your curses to one of your opponents, you don't have to use the first line of text. You can just gift a curse that you've enchanted on yourself to an opponent on upkeep, and you'll usually get the downside once. And there's some ways to mitigate that, like playing curses that can help you in addition to hurting you. And then there's going to be other ways we can kind of mess with those curses and whose control they're under later on in the game. But we're going to get to some of the curses that I think you need to play because of the way we want to play Lind. And those are going to be the curses that are featured on the Unluckiest Planeswalker, you know, with that image. Now, if you're wondering who the Unluckiest Planeswalker is, it's a dude that looks a lot like Aiden Arnautovic from this channel. Calvin put up an image of the Unluckiest Planeswalker, you can see. But these curses are interesting because they benefit both the person attacking the person enchanted with the curse and the owner of the curse. So it just so happens that if you are both the owner of the curse and the person enchanted, then you and the person attacking you will have some symmetry. You will both be getting the same amount of advantage. We'll start off with one of my personal favorite curses from the Unluckiest Planeswalker Curses cycle, and that's Curse of Opulence. This is going to be a 1 red enchantment or a curse, obviously, that enchants a player. Whenever enchanted player is attacked, mind you, that can be you. Create a colorless artifact token named Gold. It has sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Each opponent attacking that player does the same. This curse is going to be very good to enchant ourselves with early on in the game because A, if someone does want to attack us to get that advantage, we're actually ramping into Lind with the Curse of Opulence, and B, when we actually gift it to someone, we're going to draw 2 cards, and then we can start using our Lind, who has Death Touch, to attach them and start ramping into some of our larger curses. Another curse we like from this same cycle is Curse of Disturbance, which for a black and 2, you get an aura curse that enchants player, and whenever enchanted player is attacked, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Each opponent attacking that player does the same. Same thing as the first one, we can curve from this into Lind, gift it to somebody, draw 2 cards, and we do get to play 1 more curse from this Unluckiest Planeswalker cycle of curses. That's going to be Curse of Verbosity, which is 2 and a blue. You get an aura curse, enchant player. Whenever enchanted player is attacked, you draw a card. Each opponent attacking that player does the same. And all 3 of these curses we just named are great things to target yourself with early to curve into Lind. We've got a few more small curses that we could talk about. We probably don't need to here as we have a limited amount of time. Although one honorable mention I do really want to talk about is Trespasser's Curse. If you play in a pod where someone's trying to constantly loop things with Blood Artist and kill everyone with like aristocrat type damage, something you can do is enchant them with Trespasser's Curse late in the game, and that's going to cause them to kill everyone else, but you're actually going to stay at life parity because every time a creature enters the battlefield. They lose 1, you gain 1. So that's going to give you a lot of play against them. You can also attach it to yourself really quick and then just gift it later. You're actually not going to get any real downside from the Trespasser's Curse as long as you play correctly. You may end up losing 1 life from the Lind, but you're going to gain it again because when you cast the Lind, you're the person controlling the Trespasser's Curse. Now we could talk ad nauseum about all these small curses we can enchant ourselves with. There's actually quite a few we can play. I think there's like 29 curses total that we get access to in our colors, but we're not going to talk about all of those. We do want to talk about the most powerful thing our deck is doing, which is this huge line that leads to us dumping curses out just every single turn without actually spending mana. And you might know what I'm talking about, maybe you don't. There are 2 cards that let us do this. We have Curse of Misfortunes, and then we have Bitterheart Witch. Both of these cards more or less do the same thing, but I'll read the Curse of Misfortunes for you very quickly. It is a curse, or enchantment curse, for black and 4 that says enchant player. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may search your library for a curse card that doesn't have the same name as a curse attached to enchanted player, put it onto the battlefield attached to that player, then shuffle your library. And then we have Bitterheart Witch, which is worded kind of similarly. You get a 1/2 with Death Touch for the same converted mana cost. When Bitterheart Witch dies, you may search your library for a curse card, put it into the battlefield attached to target player, then shuffle your library, and your Bitterheart Witch can be used to go get Curse of Misfortunes. Now typically a curse like Curse of Misfortunes is something you'd want to put on one of your opponents, but in our deck it's actually a little bit more interesting. I think we want to put Curse of Misfortunes on ourselves, and that's because something very interesting happens on our upkeep. We get to stack our triggers however we want, and if we have it happen so Curse of Misfortunes will first go search up a curse and put it onto us, and then Lind will trigger, we can actually gift the curse we just put onto us onto whatever player we want to, and then draw 2 cards. And this is going to happen every single turn with a Curse of Misfortunes, and you can get it in a myriad of ways. One of my favorite ways is the Bitterheart Witch. But if you can get yourself into this cadence, you're going to start to draw cards very, very fast. And there are some curses in our deck that are very expensive that maybe we do not want to tap out for. And one of my favorite ones is Curse of Unbinding. This is going to be a 7 mana curse, 6 in blue for an enchant player. At the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, that player reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a creature card. Put that card onto the battlefield under your control. That player puts the rest of the revealed cards in their graveyard. You can see where this would get quite insane. You just start churning out these curses, drawing cards, and then hey, while that's all happening, all of a sudden there's creatures coming into play under your control. Now, control's an interesting word to use here because we do have to talk about what we're going to try to be doing with all of our curses. How do we actually want to try to keep the game under control? Because we're not a proactive deck necessarily. We're not trying to win as fast as possible, and we could play to a combo line. We are in Grixis colors, but it's not really fun to put Thassa's Oracle Demonic Consultation combo into a curses deck. I think that's really taking away a lot of the fun that we get to have. So we're going to talk about something that I think the internet's already caught on to, but that is the Constellation package in conjunction with the card Claws of Gix. We'll get into the Constellation cards in just a moment, but first I think it's really important to read Claws of Gix. It is a 0-drop artifact, and it says tap 1 mana, sacrifice a permanent, you gain 1 life. Now this does a lot of things for us, both in the Constellation synergy package that I'm about to talk about, as well as just with Lind herself, because obviously you're going to be able to tap 1, sacrifice a curse, because when you enchant a player with a curse, you still retain ownership of that curse. So you can sacrifice your curses to gain a life, and when they come back into play, because Lind says when a curse goes to your graveyard, it comes back into play, you enchant yourself, and then you can gift it again on your upkeep, drawing 2 cards. So then it becomes pay 1 mana to gain a life and draw 2 cards, and you get to do this once per turn cycle. You can also use it to sacrifice curses that are enchanted on you, and that can be quite good, especially if you lose access to your Lind. But what is Claws of Gix doing in a Constellation package for us? Well, let's start off by talking about the monster that is Doomwake Giant. Doomwake Giant is a 4/6 enchantment creature giant for 5. It's a black and 4 that has Constellation. Whenever Doomwake Giant or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 until end of turn. Now what does this do for us? Well, if we have a Claws of Gix and a bunch of curses with Lind's triggered ability, and people start to extend into the board, we just sacrifice all of our curses with Claws of Gix, and at end step they all come back in with Lind. So that's going to trigger your Doomwake Giant for as many curses as you had to enter the battlefield, and it is a non-symmetrical effect. It's actually just going to hit all of your opponent's creatures and not yours. So every single turn you can start to clear the board, with your only limitation being how much mana you have access to and how many curses you can sacrifice to the Claws of Gix. Now we're not going to stop there with the Constellation package. We also have Thought Reader Lamia, I believe is how you pronounce this card's name. It's 2 black and 4 for a Lamia, 5/3 with Constellation. Whenever Thought Reader Lamia or another another creature enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent discards a card. Everything I mentioned with the last card except for imagine if you were putting your opponents on Hellbent instead. And the last card I want to talk about here in our little constellation package is going to be Agent of Erebos, and this one can be quite useful once again if you're playing against a player like Calvin Traeger, because it is a 2/2 for 4, a black and 3, for an enchantment creature zombie with Constellation that says whenever Agent of Erebos or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, exile all cards from target player's graveyard. Now mind you, all these Constellation cards are actually quite good on their own. They will gain you incremental value as you drop enchantments throughout the game, but they are at their best with Claws of Gix. So when you build this deck, I would recommend having a way to go search for Claws of Gix. If you're on a budgetless build, I would even recommend playing something like an Urza Saga. Just go get it every game whenever you can. Obviously, this might even be something you go get with your Demonic Tutor if you're in that type of budget. The deck I played was $125, but I will be updating you guys shortly on how I would build it on a higher budget. I haven't actually done that yet, but look forward to maybe a short in the future on something like that. Oh, and just an honorable mention for sacrificing your enchantments because that synergizes well with Lind. I do want to talk about Peerless Research for just a moment. It's a simple card that doesn't seem like it would do that much. It just says blue and a colorless, draw 2 cards and sacrifice a permanent. But if you don't have your Claws of Gix, or even if you do but you need some card advantage, you can just sacrifice one of your curses that are attached to whoever to draw 2 cards, and then Lind will have it come back into play, and then you can re-gift it and draw 2 more cards. It's a really quick way to fill back up, and I think it's an underrated card in general, especially in this deck. Now we've talked about the deck's main game plan, how we're going to use the curses. We've talked about this Constellation engine we can have as kind of like a plan to go alongside cursing everybody, and this is going to cause us to pull ahead in the game as long as we're achieving this plan. But what are we doing about our opponents racing ahead of us? Because our game plan's kind of slow. Well, not everyone's going to like to hear this, but actually I think we're softly a stacks deck. And I'm not talking about the mean stacks. We're not playing the orbs, you know, the Winter Orb and the Static Orb, Storage Matrix, Trinisphere, stuff like that. Now, in lieu of those, we're going to be playing what some people might call even political stacks pieces. And we'll just talk about a few of them here. One of my favorite ones we get to play is Smoke, because our life total will definitely be under pressure. We're a Grixis deck. Our mana base can cost a lot of life depending on what budget we're on. And even if it doesn't, that means our game plan's slower and we're likely to get hit quite a bit as long as we're enchanting a player that has attackers. They're probably going to be very angry at us for cursing them, but it's going to be very difficult for them to do a lot of damage to you if you have Smoke in play, which is a 2 red enchantment that says no player may untap more than 1 creature during his or her untap phase. This is pretty asymmetrical for us as we don't have a ton of creatures, and although we might actually eventually win the game by attacking a player to death, that all happens after we've already stabilized and taken full control over the game, so we can actually get rid of our own Smoke using the Claws of Gix if that time ever does come. Another thing we can do, kind of in the same vein as the Smoke, is going to be Silent Arbiter, which limits each player to 1 attacker and 1 blocker per turn. We also have classics like Propaganda, which is basically just Ghostly Prison in blue, and we also have Arcane Laboratory, and this one flies under a lot of people's radars, but it can just pump the brakes on a game. It literally just says each player can only cast 1 spell each turn. Now, one other thing before we wrap this up, something I'd highly recommend putting in your Grixis deck, because you are in fact in Grixis colors, are going to be some type of board white type mechanics. If you're in a higher budget, you can do things like Toxic Deluge, but if you're down at the budget that I'm at, which is $125, you have some interesting options. You have Blasphemous Act, which is a classic. You have Chain Reaction, which is a card that, this is actually the first time I've played this card is in this deck, but it's quite good. You even have access to Shadow's Verdict, which is one I really like, and you even get to play Fire Covenant. Oh, and one other boring thing I'd like to spend as little time on as possible is we are a Grixis deck with a 4-drop commander and a ton of expensive curses. You're playing Mana Rocks, just get used to that now. Nightscape Familiar is probably your best Mana Rock because it's actually a cost reducer, and also our opponents also get to play Magic. So you're going to be really happy if you have some copies of cards like Dreadbore and Terminate in your main board. Oh, and as a final note, you even get to play some cool cards like Copy Enchantment, Mirror Maid, and Esther's Invocation to copy the curses you already have in play. Now that's going to wrap it up for our quick deep dive on how I would play Lind Cheerful Tormentor. There aren't actually a ton of lists online yet, so if you have a sweet list, definitely drop it in the comments below, and give me any feedback you have in the comments below as well. There's a lot more we could talk about with Lind Cheerful Tormentor. We could go way deeper. It might even facilitate some type of a live stream, just conversation, maybe with patrons. Let me know if you guys would like that type of long form live stream content. And once again, if you want to see any of this stuff in action, definitely check out the links in the description. I have some proofs of concepts for cards like Claws of Gix, just being quite insane in actual gameplay. A lot of people will upload videos talking about, oh, this card's really good, oh, this is what I do. But, you know, one of the nice things about this channel is we provide you with proof of concept. We have gameplay on the gameplay channel, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, that's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I will see you next time.